Hello everyone, welcome to Polity lecture number 2. We have discussed previously lecture number 1. The chapters we are in the chapter 1, which is historical background to Indian Constitution. So in the previous lecture we discussed chapter 1 of two acts which were Regulation Act 1773 and the amendment to this act, which is referred to as Pitt's India Act 1784. So previously we discussed these two acts. So let's discuss other four important acts of Crown Rule. So chapter 1, which is historical background to Indian Constitution. So this starts from Crown Rule, which was begun on 1773 and lasts for 1858. So Crown Rule 1773, 1858. After it is Company Rule 1773 to 1858, and followed by Crown Rule because of Sepoy Revolt, started from 1858 through the Government of India Act 1858 and it lasts till 1947. So we discussed Regulation Act 1773 and Pitt's India Act 1784, and the other four important acts of this company rule were Charter Act 1793 and Charter Act 1813 and Charter Act 1833 and Charter Act 1853. So once we discussed all these remaining four acts, we complete the company rule from 1773 to 1858, and in further lectures we will discuss about Crown Rule from 1858 to 1947. So Regulation Act and Pitt's India Act were completed. If you don't watch those lectures, kindly watch the previous lecture. So let's discuss about the important provisions of Charter Act 1793. So Charter Act 1793, this is not that much important for the examination, but for the continuity I was discussing this act. So we have to just go through the provisions of this act. The first main provision is the act says the East India Company's tenure have to be extended for another 20 years. So it was begun on 1773, continued for 20 years till 1793, and this act 1793 act says this, whatever the provision mentioned here, the same will be continued here as well. So for another 20 years the monopoly of East India Company in India will be continued for another 20 years, which means till 1813 the company's monopoly will be intact. So that's the provision number 1. And previously in Pitt's India Act we discussed that Board of Control were formed, and the British government, British Crown got complete control over East India Company. This is what we discussed in the Pitt's India Act. So the Charter Act 1793 says the salaries for Board of Control, the salaries for Board of Control have to be charged from East India Company, which means what? The company has to bear the salaries and allowances of the Board of Control. That's the provision number 2. And provision number 3 says East India Company has to pay 5 lakh annually, to British Crown. So this another provision was also added in this act, which says East India Company has to pay 5 lakh to British Crown along with paying salaries to Board of Control. So Board of Control, who are these people? They will supervise the political affairs of the East India Company, and also they will supervise the civil as well as military and revenue functions or affairs of East India Company. Basically they got complete control. BOC overrides COD, which is Court of Directors. So BOC overrides COD. BOC contains more powers than COD. So in a way, Governor General of Bengal, Governor General of Bengal can override council decisions, council decisions. So previously what has happened, through the Regulation Act 1773, Governor General of Bengal has to be assisted by 4 members executive council. So here what happens, majority decision will be approved, but to the Pitt's India Act, so this 4-member executive council has been reduced to 3-member executive council. If it is 2:2, the Governor General of Bengal has the veto power. He can veto any decision. So here, through Pitt's India Act, Governor General of Bengal has veto power. Here majority, here veto power. But through the 1793 Act, the Governor General of Bengal can override this 3-member executive council's decision. So it means what? A British government, a British crown contains more power compared to this executive council, basically East India Company. So this was the Charter Act 1793, and this is one of the act which also tries to regulate or suppress the activities and also performance of this East India Company, which is involving in a lot of illegal trade, private trade, and some corrupt practices. So this is about Charter Act 1793. So let's reverse. Let me repeat all the provisions. So first provision, which says East India Company has to be continued for another 20 years. Note all these points in your notebook. And the second provision says the salaries of this board of control has to be borne by East India Company. And the third provision says the East India Company has to pay 5 lakh annually to British Crown. And fourth point says the Governor General of Bengal can override the council's decision. This is about Charter Act 1793. And the next act, which is Charter Act 1813. This is important act. The questions can be asked from this act for many times in many exams. So let's see the important provisions of this act. This act contains three important provisions. The first provision is end of monopoly of East India Company in trade. So first point is end of East India Company's monopoly except tea trade in India and trade with China. This is the first provision. And the second provision, which says is permission has been granted to Christian missionaries. This is second provision. And third important provision is the Charter Act 1813 contains or provides the mention of investment of East India Company on education of Indians, 1 lakh as in this budget. So company has to pay 1 lakh per year on the education of Indians. So company has to pay 1 lakh every year on the education of Indians. So these were the three important provisions of this Charter Act 1813. So what are the important provisions? End of monopoly of East India Company. So other traders in the British can come to India and can also trade with India, but the other companies can come now with the 1813 Act. But East India Company holds the important exceptions like trade with China. Maybe British government wants to perform East India as it was performed with India. The same thing has to be repeated for the British to the China. So which is why they just kept this provision open for East India Company. So trade with China is an exception, and tea trade in India exception. So apart from this, other companies can also come to India and can also have the trade and make the profit out of India. So this is about first point. And the second point is the permission has been granted. The British Crown has granted the permission for the Christian missionaries to go to India and spread the moral and religious religious teachings in India. So Christian missionaries, permission has been granted through which act? The act is 1813 Act. And third provision is East India Company has to invest 1 lakh per year on the education of Indians. So on the paper this was there, but in reality this was never been implemented. So this was a Charter Act 1813, important for the examination. And next act, which is important act. So before discussing this act, let me remind you what we discussed previously. So in the Regulation Act 1773, I made a point. I said this act laid the foundation for the central administration in India. So the same thing has been applicable here as well. So 1833 Act, has brought the beginning of full central administration in India. How? So the Governor General of Bengal transformed into Governor General of India. So previously he is Bengal, but now it has transformed into India. So you can take over, or you can take control of all the British provinces which are present in the Indian territory. That's the meaning of this Governor General of India phrase. So Governor General of India, because of this transformation, the legislative powers or lawmaking powers of Bombay and Madras were taken away. And put in the hands of whom? Put in the hands of Governor General of India, which is why we say the beginning of central administration has been witnessed through this Charter Act 1833. But the foundation, if they ask about foundation, the foundation of the central administration began in 1773, but that full implementation will be witnessed in 1833 Act. So this was a significance of this act. And the one more thing is the Governor General India Council was there. So Governor General India Council means what? Governor General plus his Executive Council. They were, supervise the civil, revenue and military affairs of British territories. In India. So what this point basically means is, so there is East India Company. So East India Company has no role here. Only Governor General of India, along with this Executive Council, takes the supervise or controls the civil affairs, revenue affairs, military affairs of all British territories in India. So Governor General of India has a lot of powers here, which is why we say beginning of central administration in India through 1833 Act. So this is about the significance of 1833 Act. If you see the important features or important provisions of this 1833 Act, the first point, as we discussed previously, it is Governor General of Bengal. So now Governor General of Bengal has transformed into Governor General of India. So because of this transformation, the legislative powers of Bombay and Madras was lost, and they were taken over under the control of Governor General of India. So previously the Executive Council members were 4. Through British India Act it is 3, and the 1833 Act increased this number, added one more member, and now it is again 4. So 4 members were present in Executive Council, and the 4th member which were included in this act was law member. And through this act, law commission was established, and the chairman of this law commission was Lord Macaulay. Important, Lord Lord Macaulay Law Commission constituted through this act, and the chairman of this law commission was Lord Macaulay. And whatever the laws prepared from drafted from this act were known as acts. So previously it is referred to as regulations, but the laws made from this act is referred to as acts. So this was mentioned in the Charter Act 1833. And the one more important provision is East India Company lost the complete monopoly of East India Company. So the end of a complete monopoly of East India Company can be witnessed through this 1833 Act. So the main provisions were what? The main provisions were Governor General of Bengal has been transformed into Governor General of India. And the one more provision is East India Company lost the complete monopoly in India. So previously through 1813 Act, what happens? Tea trade exceptions were there, tea trade and trade with China, but tea trade and trade with China can be opened for other companies in the British government or on the British country as well. So the East India Company lost the all monopoly powers as far as India is concerned. So the trade of other companies which were present in British can come to India and can have the trade with India. So that's the meaning of this. So which act complete end of monopoly of East India Company were present over there through 1833 Act. So now what is the function of this East India Company and their court of directors? They merely serves as administrative body. They merely serves as administrative body. So these were the important provisions of this Charter Act 1833. And one more very very important point is this act tried but failed to introduce open recruitment for civil services. Open recruitment in civil services. So this act was tried but failed, but this was successful in 1853 Act that we discussed later on. And so this is about this Charter Act 1833. If you see the important facts that were present in this act were the first Governor General of India is Lord William Bentinck. So that was an important fact that has to be remembered through this act. So let us revise this the big or important act, which is 1833 Act. So this laid the beginning, or basically the beginning of central administration in India started through 1833 Act. And Governor General of India Executive Council can supervise the civil, revenue, military affairs of British territories in India. And Governor General of Bengal transformed into Governor General of India. So after Battle of Plassey, it is Governor of Bengal. First Governor of Bengal is Robert Clive. And through 1773 Act, the GB was transformed into GGB, Governor General of Bengal, and first Governor General of Bengal was Warren Hastings. And through 1833 Act, this GGB has been transformed into GGI, which is Governor General of India, and first Governor General of India was Lord William Bentinck. So central administration was started through 1833 Act by taking over the legislative powers of Bombay and Madras. So 4 members Executive Council, previous 3, 1 more member was added, and the name of that member is Law Member. So and Law Commission was also constituted. The chairman of the Law Commission was Lord Macaulay. So laws made from this act is referred to as acts. Previously it is referred to as regulations. And East India Company, end of complete monopoly of East India Company can be witnessed through this act. And this act also tried but failed to introduce or to have reforms in civil services by having the open recruitment in the civil services. But this act tried, but this one failed. This is about important points associated with Charter Act 1833. Please make note of all those points important for the examination. So the last act, which is 6th act of this company rule was Charter Act 1850. Charter Act 1853. So this is very important act, because in Governor General, to assist the Governor General, we have Executive Council only. But this act for the first time, this act determines the importance of, or notice the importance of, Legislative Council as well. And this act separate the Executive Council as well as functions of Legislative Council. So the first provision which says is, this act separated the legislative as well as executive functions of Governor General Council. So now Governor General Council contains Executive Council as well as Legislative Council. So Executive Council 4 members were present. In the Legislative Council 6 members were appointed, 4 from local British provinces, like from provinces from Bombay, Madras, Agra and Bengal, and other 2 members were appointed by British government. Other 2 members were appointed by British government. So that's the point. And so here Bombay, Madras, Bengal and Agra. These are 4 provinces, and 2 were appointed by British. So 4 plus 2, 6. 6 were from Legislative Council and 4 from Executive Council. So in combined, we say it is Governor General Council. So this act for the first time separated the executive as well as legislative functions of the Governor General Council. And this act also says the tenure of East India Company can be continued, but there is no mention of specific time here. For every act, there is a common point which says that the tenure of East India Company can be extended for another 20 years. But this act said that the tenure of East India Company can be extended. But for what time, that thing was not mentioned through this 1853 Act. Maybe Britishers were also in the view to remove this East India Company from the power in India. So that's what has happened in the later, after basically 5 years, the same thing has happened. So there's no mention of specific tenure for the East India Company, so which is a good provision that was predetermined by the Britishers. Britishers also in a view that East India Company gonna removed from the India in soon, but that was happened actually after 5 years by Crown taking over the company should. So that is the second provision. And the third provision which is important is separate governor for Bengal was appointed. Separate governor for Bengal was appointed. So previously it is Governor General of Bengal. Now it has been transformed into Governor General of India. So Governor General of India takes control over all the British provinces in India. But for Bengal, Governor of Bengal was appointed. And previously it is Court of Directors 24 as we discussed, and the strength of Court of Directors from 24 has been reduced to 18. And the very important provision which I was discussed while I was discussing 1833 Act. This Act introduced and became successful in conducting open recruitment for civil services. This is important provision, through which act the successful open recruitment for civil services has been happened. The answer would be Charter Act 1853. So which act has been tried to introduce but failed? That is 1833 Act. So the two important provisions of this act was separated the legislative functions of Governor General Council, separated the legislative and executive functions of Governor General Council. That is important provision. And second important provision would be This act introduced open recruitment for civil services in India. So these were two important provisions of this Act 1853 Act. The other provisions includes tenure of East India Company were extended, but no specific time period was mentioned, and the separate governor for Bengal was also included, and strength of court of directors has been reduced from 24 to 18. So these were the important provisions associated with Charter Act 1853. So we completed what? We completed in the first chapter, historical background of Indian Constitution. We completed what? We completed the company rule from 1773 to 1858. So we discussed by discussing Regulation Act 1773 and Pitt's India Act 1784, Charter Act 1793, and Charter Act 1813, and Charter Act 1833, and Charter Act 1853. So we discussed all these 6 acts and we see the important provisions associated with this act. So we completed the company rule, and in the next class we will discuss about Crown Rule from 1858 to 1947 by discussing about Government of India Act and Indian Council Act and Parliamentary reforms and Montagu Chelmsford reforms and Government of India Act 1935, India Independence Act 1947, and also Charter Act of Indian Council Act of 1790 1792 1892. Through this act, for the first time in India, indirect elections were introduced. So all these acts will be discussed in the further classes. So for this session, that's it for this session. Thank you so much for watching. Jai Hind.